Welcome to What's Important to You, a podcast about purpose, passion, and the things that truly matter. I'm James Dean, life coach and host, and each week I sit down with inspiring guests from all walks of life and ask one powerful question: what's important to you? Their stories will spark reflection, fuel your goals, and remind you what really matters, so you can move forward with clarity and momentum. In today's episode, I'm joined by a Somatic Coach who helps people move from overwhelm to clarity, guiding them to reconnect with their energy, purpose, and what truly matters. Her mission is to support those feeling stuck and exhausted in becoming calm, capable, and connected through the powerful relationship between body and mind. Her own journey began in 2015, returning to Ireland after years abroad and facing emotions she couldn't simply think her way out of. What followed was a path of self-discovery, healing, and transformation. Today, she runs her coaching practice in Dublin, helping others access their inner resourcefulness and create lasting change, not with quick fixes, but with deep, embodied work. Today, we find out what's important to Christina Kenny. Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, James. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too, absolutely. Well, we're going to dive straight in, Christina, with the first question, which always is, Christina, what's important to you?
Yeah, so I suppose what's important to me is living with no regrets. And by that, I would mean that, just if I feel that I'm drawn to something and just trying it, whatever that looks like, and not having any attachment to the outcome as such. So it's like one of those things that it either works out or it doesn't work, but the learning and the growth is in the trying. And I think where I got that from was my grandmother. I always remember I was quite close to my grandmother, and towards the end of her life, she had some regrets. And some of them were because of the time that she grew up in and the limitations that she had as a woman living in Ireland in the 50s, let's say. Was very different to the opportunities that I might have today. And I just remember her saying that to me, like, don't have regrets. It's just one thing that I've kind of taken with me through my life so far.
Yeah, that's a really interesting first answer. It's the first time someone's given me that as their first answer. So I think it's really powerful. And I love the bit that you added on to that, as well as not attaching yourself to an outcome for the things that you try. Because in some ways, people say you can save you to live without regret, but that sort of worrying about the potential of what might happen is what stops a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, it can hold you back when it comes to, especially because part of having more opportunities today means that we have sometimes lots of avenues to try. And then it's like, is this the right one? And there can be a lot of paralysis and analysis. And that can, as we are as coaches, people come to us when they're stuck with that. It's like, is this the right option, or is this? So it can be a scenario where it can hold you up from taking action.
Love it. So I'd love to know, with that's your sort of first thing of saying live without regrets and not worrying about necessarily the outcomes. Could you tell me some sort of examples then of how you've lived that way?
Yeah, well, I basically, I've kind of changed my career a few times, and that would be one. So I was a chef for a long time. Basically I was over in Edinburgh for many years, and I kind of did my training in restaurants and worked my way up. And it's quite a tough industry to be in, and in hospitality. And I had my own restaurant, my own bistro in Edinburgh for 6 years, I think it was. And towards the end of that, I remember before I even started my business, I was like, okay, I have two options here. I can move away, I'm ready to move, or I can uh, try out having a restaurant. It's one of my dreams, and see and make a good go of it. So I went all in with the restaurant, and I think when you have your own business, especially something like that, where it's you've got a lot of overheads, a lot of responsibilities, um, you have to go all in. There's no halfway mark. And even though it didn't work out in the end, it was an amazing experience. And then my other option was to move to Barcelona. I'd been quite a few times. I had a couple of friends who lived there. I was quite drawn to that part of the world. So when the restaurant closed up, I was like, right, I'm moving to Barcelona. So I got to do both of those things. And again, I didn't speak Spanish. I went over not on a whim, I wouldn't say a whim, but with very little in place.
Yeah.
And again, it was kind of following my heart and not knowing how it would turn out. So I spent a number of years there. And yeah, those are some of the actions I took that was like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. And neither of them were overly successful.
Sure.
I suppose if you were to look at it from an external point of view and on paper, but for me, it was very successful because I learned so much in both of those experiences by the people I met, and just lots of growth and lots of edges to get through as well, lots of discomfort to get through as well.
100%, and absolutely, because it's interesting as well, because you say from where you're reaching out to me and the work you do now, obviously coming from completely different industry in starting out or working as a chef, and then you have a background in HR as well. So I'm interested in the sense of how did you then navigate yourself through those various industries?
Yeah, so I then, after Barcelona, I moved back to Dublin, and after many, many years away, and I seen that as an opportunity to study, to work and study at the same time, which I had never really done third level education. I'd maybe done a diploma, maybe for a year and a half.
Yeah.
So it was an opportunity to study, and I was drawn to HR. And I think it's just that people, I'm quite fascinated with people. And I just love seeing the complexities of situations and people, and how can we improve this, or how can we make it better for the people, especially in organizations. So I had the opportunity to do a degree here, and that was nerve-wracking because going back to academia, which I hadn't really been part of, and learning how to reference and all of these pieces of academia, it's a lot when you haven't been doing. And that was in my 40s as well. So I definitely had for a time going, I can't do this. This isn't me. So I had to work through that piece of my negative beliefs at the time, that I had identified myself as non-academic. When the reality is like, we can all adapt. We are adaptable humans. So again, pushing through that helped me achieve my degree. But also, you mentioned about what that transition looked like, or what was the difference between, say, being in a hospitality industry in kitchens, where in kitchens the communication style is very direct, and there's not a lot of empathy in that environment. And it's just basically not a lot of sensitivity. So there's good, and what I could see was there was good and bad in both types of industries. So you go into more of an office-based industry where people aren't really communicating. They're skirting around the subject matters. So it was I had to learn, upskill, and be more empathic.
Yeah.
Again, that was maybe another label I'd put on myself. Um, whilst being a chef is like, well, maybe I'm not very empathic, but the reality is it's a skill that we can all um, learn and work through and use it in our day-to-day lives. So yeah, it was bringing parts of the hospitality, the good parts of hospitality into maybe an office environment, and the good parts for me were the more open communications.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was very different,
Yeah.
but I felt I suppose that's the other thing that's super important to me is always growing and always learning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
No,
used
I
to do
think,
that.
yeah, no, I think it's really interesting from what you're saying there in the sense of one, the differences between those industries and one about communication. But it's also the interesting thing for me to hear is when you're going through those changes or transitions is the becoming aware about yourself. And even that phrase of things of believing, oh, I'm not academic as such. I'm not a, so many people say this, oh, I wasn't very good at school, or I'm not a good, and holding this sort of belief, well, I'm not that way. But it's maybe sometimes there's a timing thing.
Hmm.
I think when you're coming, and then the subject matter.
Yeah.
So when I'm interested, when you went back in and you decided, actually, I am going to go study that degree, and you didn't, assuming it was a HR degree, then you did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like strategy and practice. It was, yeah,
Yeah,
into college and
yeah,
doing papers and
yeah,
writing papers and referencing and all of that new world
yeah. Now, the interesting thing is that
researching.
because they're just going to have to jump in because when you're saying about it though, is you're actually smiling when you're talking and thinking back of it. So when you sort of compare that to the initial belief of like I'm not academic, and then when you're actually in it and you're studying something that you're actually interested in, what was that like then when you actually sort of like allowed yourself to just do the degree?
Yeah, I felt like there was a moment where I remember my partner who was in Australia at the time, and we were on a call, and I was kind of freaking out, going, I can't do this. And Sarah, my partner, she was saying like, look, you can do it. She was giving me the pep talk and saying, you just got to do
Yeah,
it. And there's a phrase in Ireland, I know you live here for a long time, you might have heard it, but it's like, the only way to plow the field is plow the field.
yeah,
So there was a moment there where I just had to get out of my own way
yes,
and just start taking action and not really, again, that no attachment to the outcome or not looking
yeah,
way down the road, just looking at what was in front of me. And that helped me because then I could just small steps. It's like, okay, this is what I have to do now for the next few
yeah,
weeks. I have to
yep,
produce this paper. So just do that and see how that goes. And so work in stages. And I think that really helped me at the time. But I also think I'm grateful that I had that support. And I think that's another piece I've learned, which I was never very good at before, was reaching out for support when I'm
yeah,
struggling, or when I need that extra support, whether it's a chat, whether it's someone to study with, and I was able to reach out to some of my colleagues, say, hey, I knew that they were maybe a bit more advanced, and I was like, hey, would you mind spending an hour or two with me and showing me how to do this? And they would sit with me, and there was, of course, when you ask people for that, they want to help. Most of the times they're like, yeah,
yeah,
100%. It's they love to support people. So
yeah.
again, just getting out your own way is a big thing.
Absolutely. You said it a couple times. I'm interested when you say about trying not to get too attached to the outcome, which I completely agree with. I think it's a really positive way to being because if we get too fixated on the outcome and it doesn't work out, it could be obviously devastating. But I'm interested in the sense of the fact that you had the restaurant and for even 6 years is a significant length of time when you had to sort of move on from that business and move away from it. How did you manage that sort of, I'm assuming still disappointment of having to give up something like that and move on. What was that sort
Yeah.
of that moment like?
Yeah, well, I would describe it like a grief, you know,
Mm,
it's like losing someone, you know,
yeah,
because I was attached to the restaurant
sure.
because it was all in and it was like part of me. And it became a part of my identity a little bit,
Mm,
which wasn't healthy at the time for sure. But yeah, it felt like there was a process of grieving that
mm,
occurred during that time. And
yeah,
I felt what really helped was to give it space
yeah,
to acknowledge that and to allow those stronger emotions to come up at that time because it was going to be a big loss, you know, because
yeah,
it's as you say, 6 years. But when you're 6 years in that kind of, you've built something,
yeah,
everybody associates this thing with you.
yeah.
It becomes part of you, and you're there every day, morning and night. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing because that piece I've spoken to a few people recently on the show, and there's the idea of identity coming up a few times actually. I think it's a really interesting thing, and especially when it's in relation to something like your career or work. You know, when it's like because it's very much as you say, like, I am a chef, I am a restaurant owner. You know what I mean? It's very tangible because it's especially when it's bricks and mortar as well. So, and then as you say, when having to sort of leave or move on from that identity and almost reforge a new one on, or just allowing it to be, not necessarily attaching yourself to something. So when you've moved then through now, is that something that you still with your career is?
Yeah, that's a good question, James. It is definitely something I'm much more aware of this time
Yeah.
around. And I, you know, for example, an example could be, say, for example, I was to reach out to someone and maybe there was some work
Mm,
involved from a HR perspective or a coaching client, and maybe it doesn't work out for
yeah.
whatever reason. And it's like, how is that separate? How is that the business? What
Mm,
is the business's and what is mine?
yeah.
You know, and that is something that, yeah, I do grapple with for sure.
Sure.
So, for example, if there's disappointment or it feels like it's personal sometimes,
Mm,
but the reality is it's not, and it's like bringing more awareness to that. I don't think I have it nailed at all by any stretch of the
yeah.
imagination, but it's I think having more awareness around that and going, okay, is this mine or is it the businesses, and maybe
Yeah.
just having those little conversations with myself afterwards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I'd love to know more about then what is it you, because after those different changes of very different industries, what is it that's the real sort of crux of what you do at the moment, Christina?
Yeah. So I've three hats.
Love it.
Yeah, three hats. So I suppose the HR perspective, I work with smaller, sort of SMEs, small to medium
Yep.
sized companies. I go in and I quite hands on with them. I help them kind of whether it's reviewing their whole HR offering. But I also help them running their senior management meetings and helping them
Okay.
become more focused on that and coming out of the trees to
Mm,
see more of the high level things that are happening, the risks maybe internally and externally, and helping them to keep actioning so that we don't
mm,
walk away and then it doesn't happen. So I feel like I'm quite strong at helping senior management teams with that type of work because of previous roles and
mm,
being coming from that myself.
yep.
I do understand how easy it is to get dragged into the day to day. And then, so that's one hat. And then another hat is I deliver mental health first aid training for Mental Health First Aid Ireland. So I deliver training to any kind of company. So it could be the likes of the ESB, could
Yeah.
be various companies around
Mm,
Ireland. But I mostly concentrate on Dublin. And then we also are rolling out mental health first aid in the Guards. So I've delivered some training with
Okay.
them also. So I've been doing that for 3 years, and I really do enjoy it because it's such a important
Yeah.
topic, and very passionate about trying to break down that stigma around mental health
Yeah.
issues, and having that conversation with people who are struggling. And then my other hat is I'm a somatic coach. So like life coaching, but the somatic lens. So I'm very passionate about all things somatic as well. So
Cool. Love it. So there's two things I want to know more about then. So the first is a sense of the mental health first aid training. It's to be honest, the very first time I've heard that in that regard, because I've done traditional first aid courses myself
yeah.
a few times, and been done basic sort of first aiding. So what's the difference? What's mental health first aiding?
Yeah, so the difference really is it's basically this particular training that was developed in Australia, in Canberra, and it's been rolled out in 30 countries now around the world. So we pretty much follow the format that this was created in the first place. And the woman who created it, Betty Kitchener, she created it initially because she was working in the emergency rooms, and she was seeing a lot of people presenting in mental health crisis. And she had a look around, and she couldn't understand why it got to that point. What was
Yeah.
there before a crisis scenario? So her and her husband kind of developed this program to um, help try and catch people earlier. So it's like early intervention.
Yeah.
So throughout the 2 days, we do a 2-day program, and we look at different mental disorders, mental illnesses. We talk about signs and symptoms, but we look at it from a crisis perspective, like so someone's in a crisis, or a non-crisis perspective, and we give people a framework to follow. And a lot of times it's about having that conversation, and how to have that conversation with someone that you're concerned about, how to spot the signs, how to
Yeah.
have a conversation, and how to signpost them as well, and support them with that. So that's the
Yeah.
crux of what it's about.
Very good. No, I mean it's because it's one of those things that I would only probably see through the news or just articles, in a sense of the increase, obviously, of people presenting and things in relation to sort of mental health issues, but in a sense of how traditional first aid responders, whether it be paramedics, guards, things like that, don't have necessarily this training
Yeah,
or understanding of how to, even you say, have the conversation or spot it.
yeah,
So it's obviously something that's massively important
yeah.
to support those people who are the predominant people who are going to be that first person point of contact, should I say?
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of times we have a tendency, and I've been there myself many years ago, and I haven't had the education around it. I'd maybe see someone that's struggling, but I just wouldn't know what to do or how to support them. So you think maybe I shouldn't say anything because I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yeah,
And that can really hold people back. And if we don't have those conversations earlier, then, potentially their symptoms and are going to get more chronic. They're going to develop a bigger problem, and it'll take a lot longer to recover from,
yeah,
So, and it's such a huge impact on their life and the people around them as well.
yeah,
So
yeah.
everybody that leaves these 2 days just absolutely love the course. It's quite intense. It's a lot to get through in 2 days, and it's heavy subject matters, but
Sure.
they walk away feeling a lot more confident about being able to have conversations, and also just breaking down stigma and pieces around what we might think, and but what is the
Yeah,
reality because of maybe what we see in the media and that type of thing
yeah,
too.
yeah. And is it some things that you're predominantly working with recognized sort of companies or organizations? Is it something that's going to spread, do you think? Is it going to grow to, in a sense of a standard that it be presented to people just from the general public, or is it still kind of in a more organizational way at the moment?
Yeah, I would hope so. I really would. I know there's a youth mental health
Yeah,
training. I don't deliver that training,
yeah,
but within our same
Yeah.
company as such.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's delivered to people who work with youth. So, and
Brilliant.
they're doing housing associations, places
Sure.
like that. So I would hope that it becomes that the general public can jump on these courses, and that's even if it's community leaders,
Yeah.
within different communities. I think it's just so helpful. And it's
Yeah.
everybody that comes on it. Like, for example, we kind of pitch it towards mental health, first aid and work, but everybody
Yeah.
comes on it because they're looking at it from their own lives and
Yes.
their own communities as well.
Of
So
course.
the more people that have this training, the better, of course,
Yeah.
because it'll just
Absolutely.
helps for people to feel more confident in having
Yeah.
conversations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was fantastic. Very powerful. And then the last thing is, so the third had again. So you have to tell me the word again. You said
Somatics.
somatic. So
Yeah.
again, you'll have to excuse my
No, that's
ignorance in relation
okay.
to that word again. So tell me what that means then.
Yeah. Somatics is okay, so I'll just briefly explain it and then maybe I'll give you an example,
Yeah.
because it can be one of those things that people are like, what are you talking about? So somatics is it's all about the body. So it's soma is the Greek word for the living body. And the
Okay.
living body is not just your physical body, but it's your beliefs, it's your the way you're showing up in the world, and all the things that have influenced you to become the way you are today. So that's your soma, shall we say.
Okay.
Your thoughts, your beliefs, your experiences to date, and the influences from different environments. And so when I'm working as a somatic coach, we're basically looking at from the body. We try and bring people down into their body, into what sensations, get more awareness of what's going on. Because in this world, we're spending so much time in our head and not enough time connected to our whole self. And if we looked at earlier in the conversation, when I followed my heart to, to Barcelona, whether it worked out or not, but I was doing something that I will never regret doing because I followed my heart.
Yes.
And sometimes when we're, as you're a coach yourself, when people are coming to us and they're stuck and they have all these options, and in their head they're trying to logic their way to a solution. It's like, let's move down into what is it, like, let's drop into our body and find out what truly matters to you. What is it that you really care about? And let's tap into that. And without thinking of all these influence, well, I must show up like this, or I must do this for other people. But also it's very much about how we act in relation to others. So, for example, if we're in the workplace, we might have some conflict in the workplace, or we have a challenging relationship within the family. And it's like noticing what's happening when these situations occur in your body, what's happening. So an explanation I like to give is when the other week I was heading off to do one of these mental health first aid training. I was in the car and this car cut in front of me in traffic. I could feel the frustration coming up inside of me. And then I just dropped into my soma and I was like, what's happening? And I noticed that I was gripping my steering wheel quite firmly. My breath was very, very shallow, like tightness here and really tight around the eyes and tension around the face. So I just gave myself a moment to start to go, okay, just release a little bit on the steering wheel, take a deeper breath in, start to soften around the face. And with that, it kind of dissipated that frustration. And then it meant that I wasn't carrying that with me for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So again, these are practices. We work with lots of different practices with our clients, and ways for them to observe what is happening. And it kind of gives a perspective of self-compassion as well, because again, it's not part of your identity as such. It's just showing what's showing up in your nervous system and going,
Yeah.
what would it look like if we let go of that a little bit? What
Mm.
changes? What shifts? Because
Yeah.
we have all of these emotions and they're running around us, and it's healthy to have emotions, different types of
Yeah.
emotions, but in our society we kind of say you can't be angry or you can't be sad, and so we suppress them, and when we suppress them then they're stuck within our system, and it's like ways that we can start to allow them to come up, and ways that we can process these emotions. Go, yeah, I am annoyed that that guy cut me up. A guy, could have been a girl,
Yeah.
um, cut me up in traffic, but that's okay. I don't
Yeah.
need to take this with me all day, you know?
Yeah. No, I love it. It's it got me thinking about so many different things there, and I'll share with the one things that stuck out there in the sense of the phrase of trying to logic your way out or way into something, trying to and and almost being out of tune with the rest of your body, only in the head, and trying to think your way through something. Because it made me think about my own sort of previous sort of years ago, in a sense of previous occupations and times where it's like almost just going to the train to go to the office or place where I put somewhere where I wasn't necessarily in the right place or wanted to do that role.
Yeah.
So you're already, even on the way in, the it's only looking back now, the body was kind of reacting in a negative way, but the brain is the logic is going about pay per month, bills, mortgage, etc., etc., etc. So, and the logic of, oh, when this, when that, future, do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what made me think about it. The how often we override with the head.
Yeah. Like you just reminded me there of that phrase where you're like, well, when I get that, I'll be happy. When I get this, I'll be happy. You know, and it's like, how can we access that here and now? You know, why do we have
Yes.
to wait?
Yeah. So I'm interested then when you're working with someone on this sort of process, in a sense of getting them in tune more with their body and sort of maybe potentially less in their head. One of the things I'm really interested in when I talk to someone like that, what's it like when you're working with someone and you're experiencing it with them, when you start to see and hear that they're doing it? What's that actually like?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually when I studied this course, we were doing it through, it's a Strozzi Institute. They're based in California, but we were the first European cohort. And one of my peers or friends now, she's a psychologist in London and has been for many years. And she was like, this is so much harder than her psychology degree, because, and her psychology practice, because there was a lot of models and frameworks that they would use within the therapeutic
Yeah.
setting. And with somatic coaching, it's very much about you and how you're presenting and how you're in your soma.
Mm.
So there's a lot of, again, about what's mine and what's theirs as in the client. So there's a lot of
Mm.
preparation before
Yes.
maybe being with someone. And when you are dropping into that in a very embodied way with your client, that seems to automatically give some kind of a permission to the client to release, let go, and
Mm.
let the stories fall away, and be with what's there on a deeper level,
Mm.
because we can be in our stories, and
Mm.
sometimes I you know, you do kind of have to bring them down the layers. But
Yeah.
underneath then, that when this emotion is released, underneath that is the gold. That's the part, whereas you can really admit in the open, honestly, in this space, what it is you care about and what it is you long for.
Mm. Mm.
And when you name
Yeah.
that out loud in that space, it's quite powerful, you know.
Yeah.
And,
No, that's it, and it's getting to that point of, as you say, when you're going down with someone to get them. Verbalization is just hugely powerful. And I think what I love about sort of your own story in a sense as well, though, is we spoke about earlier. When we talk about, because career is a big thing, isn't it? Obviously, what we do is it's part of what we do as a society, of what we do for work, and from the most logistical side of it of earning money to live, and then there's almost like this other side of it in doing the whole thing of doing something that you love or you'll never work in a day, or that how those clash together sometimes. But the fact that you've gone through those various different industries and those various different roles, it can demonstrate to people that you can do these different things. Just because you were doing something as in hospitality or chef doesn't mean you can't work in HR or in coaching. So because I've experienced it myself, I'd be interested, when you're talking to these people, is it mainly career that they're working with you, or is there other things that come up?
Yeah, there's a lot of different reasons, but I think when people come in to me, particularly, they can come in with a variety of different reasons for why they're showing up there. Maybe they're looking for, they're stuck in relation, they don't like their job, their career, or they're at a crossroads of what do they want to do next, or that it could be a number of different things. But I think once people, there are kind of trends within what shows up, and I'm finding a lot of times now people are quite lonely. There's like they're missing connections, like real connections. That's coming up quite a bit, I have to say, within, and I can understand that because obviously it's a real epidemic in the world, because we're creating more individualized kind of living ways. And so a lot of times it's about what supports do they have around them, and how can they generate or nurture a more supportive system for themselves. And that can be a place that if we put attention on, that we can grow. But it takes attention. It doesn't happen organically as much as it used to. So,
Sure.
But again, once people say that comes up for people and they get to that stage, then they say, okay, I'm feeling lonely, or I feel a bit isolated, and I feel I don't really have the support. And it's like, well, do you support yourself? Is a starting point. And sometimes we don't. We kind of abandon ourselves for others. We talk about boundaries and various things like that. And that could be a starting point. And then another part is building competencies about asking or making requests, asking people for what you want. So it's very, I love it. I think it's super interesting. I feel it's very powerful. I mean, there's so many modalities out there, and I think they're all very much relevant, and it's different strokes for different folks. But for me, the somatics, it's a way to kind of drop into really how you can change things quite quickly when you have that awareness. So with a more awareness, you have choice. Like we can all sit. I think Richard Strozzi Heckler, who's the main teacher of the Strozzi Institute, the founder, he was telling us one time, he goes, we're not here to collect somatic awareness badges. So by that he meant like, we can all be aware, but what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
So it's like, right, I'm aware, I have a choice. What choice am I making here?
Yeah. No, I think, and that's a really, I love you said that, because it's, as you say, the next step is taking the action on the back of something, and taking that action through that more generate after that self-awareness.
Yeah.
So it's that piece has to kind of come first. Otherwise you're just kind of just going every which way, isn't it? It's like, you're doing, or it's that sort of cliche of doing the same thing and expecting different results, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's and that's what we find with people. It's like, well, that sometimes if you're stuck in that sort of logic brain or just doing it this way for whatever reason, because if it's historical sort of reasons, because of judgment of other people, or it's what you've always done, or whatever it is. But if you keep just doing the same loop over and over, it's going to get the
Yeah.
same thing. But as you say, from what you're trying to, from what I'm listening right, is get people to have that drop down, get that self-awareness of what it actually feels like in themselves. That's one thing, but you still got to then move forward.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. And that can be the courageous part,
Yes.
is
Yes.
taking those steps.
Sure. Absolutely. And I suppose then, because you said yourself, from your personal perspective, not trying to live within the outcomes too much and not try and put too much on the outcomes. And this is always like the great contradiction of setting goals or things like that, because it's one thing to have a goal or something to work towards. And I've been talking about all week myself in some ways about clarity, but there's got to be adaptability as well. There's got to be something to go towards, but there's also got to be, I think it's really healthy not to necessarily completely tie yourself to the outcome. So how do you work with clients on that, in a sense of what you're going towards versus not being too attached to the outcome?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and yeah, I'd love to address that one because, yeah, definitely, it is important to have a vision or
Mm,
that sense of purpose, but it's not necessarily that it has to be something so tangible. It could be like, I want to write a book, for example,
yeah,
and that's something tangible. It's like, right, I'm gonna do I want to do a degree. I want to achieve a degree. So you start working towards that. But it can also be something about like how you are, how you are
yeah,
now, and how you would like to be different. How you want to be, and it could be like that you want to be more you in that sense. So I want to be, say women of my age. There'd be a lot of, I don't want to be the caregiver for everybody in the family. I want to get me back, for example. And that's something that you can work towards. So it doesn't necessarily need to be something that's a, a kind of a solid,
mm,
practical objective. It could be a way of coming back to yourself,
yeah,
or it could be that you are looking to have more healthy, intimate connections
mm,
with the people around you. And how do then it's like, okay, let's start working towards that. But I
yeah,
suppose that goal piece is going to be underneath. It's when we work down and then we find out what it is that matters to them, and then
yeah,
it's like, how would you see that in the future? Like, what would that look like, and how can we work towards that?
yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
I love that,
but
because
it can change, like you say, for sure.
yeah, absolutely. No, I love that, because there's definitely and I love almost. I have this weird sort of fascination with contradictions, in a sense of like the one set of sort of thinking in relation to setting goals and vision boards is to be as specific as possible, and have a date, have a number, have a this, have and then relentlessly work towards that specific thing, and that can, there's no doubt that can work, and you can achieve that sort of thing. You can have it physically in your hand or in your bank account, or have the title on your what have you, have the letters. But there's an element to me which I think you're more getting into as well with what you're doing, is like, but what does that mean? Well,
Mm.
that's, it's all great, but it's still arguably quite surface.
Yeah,
So so is it, because this is sometimes like, are you doing it because that's what you really want, because, or is it because the whole thing of like, it'll show them, you'll prove them wrong, what's the driving motivation behind it? Because I think that's a much more interesting question. What's the sort of, and that, as you said, about meaning, purpose, a way of, you said it yourself, a way of being. I think that's a much more interesting conversation.
yeah. I feel like it's you know, when we move down, because we are influenced by
Yeah,
those around us. And so, initially when people come to me, it's like, yeah, I want this or that. And usually it's influenced by the people around us. But when we get to the nitty gritty, it's like, well, no, if you didn't have to think about what everybody else wants from you, like, what is it that you want? If you were to say it out loud, it's just me and you here, what would that be? And how does it feel to say that? You know, is that igniting something within you, like an aliveness within you? And when people tap into that, they're like, oh yeah, I want more of that.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. No, it's extremely powerful, one, to hear it, but then you say to be the person that says it, it's hugely empowering. Absolutely. No, fabulous stuff. So one of the questions I always love to ask my guest, Christina, is I do think quotes and phrases can be quite powerful if they're used in a really applicable way. So are there any quotes or phrases that are important to you?
Yeah, well, I feel like I've said two already today.
Yeah.
I've said the no attachments to
Yeah.
to an outcome, and you might need to remind me of the book that came from. It was definitely one that was on our coaching list of readings back when I did my coaching diploma.
You're putting me under the spot now
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
I know. But it's obviously one that's really
Yeah.
helped me, and
Yeah.
and I always remind myself of that a lot, especially if sometimes it does creep in where you do become attached, and you're like, just let
100%.
that go, and let that fall away. And yeah, and then this was the other one I was mentioning was Richard, and he's a great teacher, and I just felt like that his way of teaching is quite, practical at the same time. And so in relation to that somatic awareness, and like, because we do have a tendency to learn, like, I feel like I'm one, I love learning. And if I didn't have to earn money, I'd be like, oh, I'll do the next course.
Yes.
But
Yes.
then it's like, what is the point of that? What am I just doing this for the sake of doing this?
Oh,
like, why am I doing this?
absolutely.
So I do feel like that somatic awareness and taking action, just we're not here to collect these badges. Like we need to action from them. So I suppose those are the ones that come to mind just now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think it's a really good one to echo that one about we're not just here to collect the badges, because there's that sort of contradiction in my own head, in the sense of there's an element of wanting people who, in any sort of profession or any industry, to be qualified and to be up to date and know what they're talking about, and have that sort of education, for want of a better word, that they're the right person to do the role.
Yeah.
And then there's that other side of it, as you say, you're just ticking boxes, and there's an element of, sometimes I think that I can find myself falling into the trap when I go back and look at other courses, education, qualification. And when I really do take the time to think, why am I looking at this again? It's because I'm at a point of resistance. I'm thinking that, I need X in order to do Y. And I'm like, no, I'm just scared to do Y. Or there's something that's, so there's an element of, there's an element of, we want to be qualified, we want to be educated. But if you already are, then you're putting it off for something else. Exactly. What's stopping you? Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. And I believe, like with coaching, this format, very similar to being a chef, it's like, it's getting the reps in. It's like the more you're with people and you're in that space and being more embodied, the better you become. Not necessarily sitting with a group doing the studying part. I mean, that is important to get the qualifications, you're right, but you don't need to keep adding on. You just need to be with the people and supporting them and serving them. And because in this current climate in the world we're in, it's just, I know this is the most important thing I can be doing right now, for myself and for my clients.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned was it Stephen, the gentleman's name? Is that right?
Oh, Richard.
Richard, my apologies again.
That's okay.
But so because he obviously sounds like a big influence. Who else would you say have been big influences in your life?
Well, I'd mentioned my grandmother. You know,
Yeah.
she instilled my passion for food and travel. So she was definitely and she was a very formidable woman, and I really admired her as a little grandchild.
Yeah.
And she was a great influence on me. And I feel that, yeah, my community, I know this probably is a strange one,
Mm.
but like it's my somatic coaching community, or I really lean on them a lot.
Mm.
And the kind of space that we've created, um, I feel like we need more of in the world, you know.
Mm.
And it's a space, it's a heart-led space where, you know, even when I'm, say, I deliver some workshops as well, doing my somatics to try and um, exp- show people what experience, what it's about.
Mm.
And I always start that workshop with, they're behind me, they've got my back. And it's really great to have that support, but also that knowledge. So they inspire me, the work they're doing, and it's just lovely to be part of that. And I think we all have that need of a sense of belonging. And even
Yeah.
though we mightn't be here physically in person, we are connected from the experiences that
Yeah.
we've gone through and our aligned
Yeah.
interests.
Absolutely. No, because you said it actually a minute ago, and you just reminded me to say about it in a sense of that one of the reasons maybe people are coming to you is because of that feeling of loneliness or being alone.
Mm,
And then you're saying there about the whole thing you've had is that feeling of support, and from whether it be your community or the people that you've had around you. And it's this thing of, I sometimes think, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this, when the loneliness thing or the feeling of isolation even is when people have this belief that the thought that they're having is they're the only person to have
yeah,
to think that way, and and not say they're not saying it out loud. It's not verbalizing it because they're thinking, if I say this, Christina or James or everyone thinks going to think I'm, you know, crazy.
yeah,
I'm going to be judged for saying this because they're going to
yeah,
think something. They're going to think less of me as such. But the truth is that you're not the only person to think that way. Lots of people are either thinking that way or have thought that way in the previously or will in the future. So it's that sharing of that inner worry, doubt, feeling, thought, whatever it is hugely um, releasing, but also creates that connection.
yeah, yeah, 100%. That kind of tapping into that vulnerability, you know.
Yes,
But I do understand, like there's a part maybe that there's a bit of shame, but
of
also
course.
there could be that, oh, I don't want to bother them. You know, that'd be a
Yeah,
very Irish way. Oh, I won't bother them with my worries. And as you know,
yeah.
here when people ask, "How are you doing?" So, oh, I'm
Oh,
grand.
grand. Yeah,
It's like, do you really want to know how I am?
yeah, yeah,
And so it's about us who are maybe feeling okay, and is creating that within our own groups. You know, I think
yeah,
some close friends of mine, we would go, "How are you?" And they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I'm grand." And it's like, "Well, how are you really?" So
yeah,
you kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
follow it up again to give people the
Yes,
opportunity to open up too, you
yes,
know. So it's to create that environment that um, people feel like they have permission to be honest and
yeah.
say how they feel
100%,
too. So it's a two-way
100%,
street.
100%. Absolutely, no, love it, love it.
Yeah.
Um, well, Christina, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you and get to know you in this conversation today. I do have one more question before I let you go, which is what's important for your future?
Mm, very good question. I think, well, for me, I'm really doing my work, you know, my own inner
Yeah,
work, and on how I show up in relation with others. And so that's a big area of focus for me, and learning all the time. And
mm,
also just hoping that this is going to be there's longevity within as a coach, as a somatic coach, and hoping to build that as my main business down the line. Like, so from a business perspective, yeah, I would be leaning towards the somatic coaching for sure. So yeah, getting the word out about coaching, and I think you're doing a great job, James. And I think it's so important because it's, you know, if you look at the world of therapy, like a lot of the therapists now in Ireland, around Dublin, are like, they're booked out all the time. And I know coaching is not therapy. However, we can be a nice way to support people who are maybe finishing off therapy. They're kind of a nice transition into the world. And I feel like we've got a place there as an extra support for people that would be nice to tap into.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And I think it's, the more I sort of chat to people like yourself and then myself in it, being in that space, I think it's still growing. I think it's still changing. I think it's changing perceptions on people, in the sense of removing that perception that coaching is just for the C-suite and execs or a certain type of people. And I was thinking about this last night, actually, because I all the time thinking, I was like, the way I was thinking it last night was like, coaching's not for everybody, but it can be for anybody. And what I mean by that, it's like, not everybody is ready for it. This isn't about where you are in a career or class or nothing like that, or industry. But if you're not willing and ready to give yourself to it, then it's not for you. But in the sense of, it can and work for anybody. And we have to remove that. I think that's the barrier in a sense of coaching. It's like, you don't have to be going through therapy. You don't have to be quote unquote struggling, because we're not trying to fix anyone. It's about, you're in a moment of either transition, stuck, whatever it is. We can help enable you to build the bridge. We're not you know what I mean? It's the conduit, whatever you want to call it. So I think it's, so I know I wish you continue success with it, Christina. Absolutely.
Thank you.
In doing it yourself. I'm going to make sure that I'll be sharing all of where people can follow you and connect online in the show notes. But if you would like to give a shout out now of where people can follow you online.
Yeah, great. I'm the Body Soul Coach. So you can find me on LinkedIn, just Christina Kenny, or the Body Soul Coach, and also on Instagram. And I also have a website, which is thebodysoulcoach.com, and you'll find out more information about me there. But yeah, if anyone's curious to know more about anything that I've shared today, please reach out. I'd love to chat.
100%. And I say all of those links will be in the show notes, guys. So make sure you check them out. So for last time we got Christina, thank you so much again.
Thank you, James, for the invite. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to What's Important to You. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if it resonated, share it with someone who might need it too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or ask a question, and let's keep the conversation going. I'm James Dean, and I'll be back soon with another real conversation to help you reconnect with what truly matters. Until then, take care and stay curious.